If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Mike Lane, a professor and strength and conditioning specialist at Eastern Kentucky University, who focuses specifically on tactical athletes, including law enforcement, military, and fire service. In this episode, we talk about what real physical preparation looks like for people in high-stakes professions, covering why aerobic capacity is the most overlooked gap in most first responder training, how to program around shift work when there's no off-season, and how the stress response tools we use in sport translate directly into the field. If you're a first responder yourself, or you work with first responders, or professionals in any physically demanding profession, this conversation's for you. Let's get into it. Today, it is such a pleasure to welcome Dr. Mike Lane to the show. He and I were introduced through a mutual friend, Phil White, and immediately hit it off when we had a call as two super nerdy meatheads who just really enjoy the science of how we prepare the physical bodies. What was really inspiring to me was the strength and conditioning expertise that you've built around the tactical athlete, the first responder. There are so many jobs that people go to that have immense physical demand on them, but that isn't necessarily recognized as the job, right? The technical element is recognized as the job, but it comes with your ability to execute under massive physical strain. And so I've seen injuries, I've seen the mindset, the support that's just completely absent versus what we have with a pro athlete. We were just talking about firefighters before we hit record. The stakes of a firefighter versus an NHL hockey player, right? There's just very different outcomes if things go wrong. Like somebody scores a goal on us, everyone's very sad on the bus on the way to the plane, but we all have a nice meal and we fly home and we go to get in our beds. But just not the case with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, it's definitely a literal, complete success, or, well, let's not talk about the other possible, outcome. And, if anything goes down traumatically on the ice, which obviously you can see examples of people even getting their carotids slashed, and you immediately have stoppage of play, EMT is on there, you're fixing the problem. They're going then immediately to, some of the best medical providers in that area and immediately getting seen. Whereas if you are a firefighter, you're the one who's actually trying to pull people out of said scenes. And, it's a testament to their equipment in that, and this is not to be glib, so we're clear, but like the number one killer of firefighters is crush. Like the building just falls, and like that's physics and that's horrible. But then after that, it's cardiovascular. And so it's the sheer metabolic demand, the heat of wearing that equipment. And then you're obviously going, full speed in a variety of very challenging positions that require strength, muscular endurance, and, pretty much every aspect of fitness. And if part of that physical fitness isn't where you need it to be, you can see how things can become lethal very quickly. And it's like when we're working with the ROTC cadets here on our campus and doing their training, and it's like, it turns out there is no timeout in a firefight. Like there is the straight up, you go, and that requires some very different programming, because the other thing is, go back to, we'll stick with that hockey analogy. Like, I'm from St. Louis, so that means I'm contractually obligated to be a Blues fan. They know the exact minute, second that puck will drop, and then it's time to go for the next, game. Whereas you just know when you're on call, you just know when you're on shift, and you could have a shift that the worst thing you have to do is pull a cat out of a tree, or you could have one that is a legit, the proverbial fire at the orphanage, and you're running into a building to save large numbers of humans that are not able to pull themselves out of their own accord. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting programming challenge because also back to the hockey, we have an off season. We know when those athletes can just purely develop their
Yeah.
fitness because they don't have to worry about maintenance. Where if you're on, two, three 24-hour shifts, you at least know when you have to be on and you have a little bit of time off, but we don't have a true off season to
Yeah.
develop that fitness unless they want to really disappoint their spouse with like, hey, our vacation this year is going to be a 2-week training camp for me and I'm going to
Yeah.
run the Rocky training montage. And
Yeah.
then you wonder why they're on their third wife or husband.
Mike, that's a really interesting point, because that one of the things that we do with pro sports, and it doesn't matter the sport, you name it. The first thing we start out with is really defining the demands of the sport. So what capacities do we have to build across the spectrum of human physiology? What are the biomechanics of the sport? What are the major injury risk factors? And so we have teams of people. I had a whole army of staff that worked for me, who every section of that was taken care of by a specialist, and we understood it, and we could produce a very detailed plan for each individual. That, for me, I've seen it over and over, has just been lacking. And your specialty and a lot of your research is in coming up with some of those definitions, but we're still lacking that support, I think, in comparing what we know about the demands of sport to what we know about the demands of many of these professions, where even down to surgeons. You think of a surgeon has to lean over a table for 18 hours doing a surgery, debilitating back pain later in life, but they sort of not taught about, we might want to prepare you for that. Right. And so can you walk us through that a little bit? Like what you have available within your department, but then how that information is getting out to the mainstream.
And oh boy, we are going to, welcome to the can of worms. And we will simply say that these are my opinions. And my goal is not to upset people on purpose. When that does happen in the conversation, I'll say I'm being deliberately cruel. But that's not right now. And so, but you're right. When it comes to, military, they have the AFT. We have those physical standards. And then obviously, you've got your Rangers, your other types that even have higher physical standards, which is still, they're doing their best to make sure that they at least have the entry level levels of physical fitness in order to be successful, hypothetically. But of course, it's like was it Office Space, like the minimum pieces of flair, like the goal is to exceed it. And you can see why in this case you want to exceed that levels of physical fitness. And then with police, depending on which state, there's different physical fitness standards tests. Where I'm at in Kentucky, it's POPs testing. And it has its flaws, but it's a 1.5 mile run, 300-meter sprint, max push-ups, max sit-ups, and bench press. And I did say that kind of in opposite order of what it really is. And you can see how it's like, okay, 1.5 mile run, a good test of aerobic fitness. 300-meter, good test of anaerobic fitness. And it's the fact that you can replicate it. We can do it in different locations. But as you and I both have played enough sports and lived enough life, if you give me the option between running 1.5 miles and having to go full live, folk style wrestling against someone in my weight class at this point in my life, where's the track? I'll run that any second.
I will, yes, in a heartbeat.
Indeed. And so, but that's the reality of what we're really using that fitness for, is both the pursuit through the 300-meter. And then once you get there, you are the person who's trying to apprehend the person. It's not like, tag, you're arrested now. Okay, let's go to jail. It's like, and that was the ante.
Right.
Now you got to play your hand.
To suppress you against your will. Right.
And nobody wants to go to adult timeout. And especially they can be chemically enhanced. So you've got a lot of different variables there. And so, with those type situations, and you're looking at those police officers, and this is where they do a really good job of giving them percentage ranks of where it's like, okay, here's where you are with the 1.5 time. Here's you are with 300-meter. Here you are with this. And this is, again, my own opinions. One of the challenges is the fact that they pass it with cadet graduation, but most precincts don't require them to do this as kind of like an annualized physical fitness, where U.S. military, yes, the standards, they do change a little bit with age, but we still maintain that you have to pass said standards. And
so more of a monitoring mindset, where you have to maintain that level of of conditioning.
Yeah, and that's where, my goal is not to point out problems with systems because it's easy and that's just
Yeah.
punching down. Instead, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, you, I'm going to guess based upon both of our builds that we would probably do very well on the bench press, and the
Right.
muscular endurance would be okay. But I will definitely admit that my mile and a half time, my aerobic battery would be,
Yeah.
what the issue is, and that's where for those, if I am a police officer and I undergo something like that, that's a battery of tests that shows varying levels of fitness, where's my weak point? And that's probably the thing I need to develop.
Mm-hmm.
Because, don't get me wrong, selling long distance running, selling aerobic training to people that like to lift weights is like trying to sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman wearing white gloves. Like, you're going to have a
Yeah.
heck of a time. But if you've got a better aerobic base, you recover from everything faster. And
Yeah.
also, you typically live longer. And what's the point of being a police officer and going through the challenges of that job, of being a firefighter, going through the challenges of that job, retiring after 20 years, and then having the heart attack that puts you into the dirt after you've
Yeah.
only been retired for, 5 years? Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't sound fun. So
Yeah.
it's trying to figure out, where is your weakness, and, do you have a good test like that? Or, okay, this is where maybe different tests actually use like a variation of like Fight Gone Bad
Mm-hmm.
from CrossFit, if you're familiar with that workout.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a
Mm-hmm.
bad complex. Other of them have like cool versions. It's kind of like the CPAT, where for like firefighters, they're full gear. They got to climb stairs. They got to move
Yeah.
hoses. They got to swing the sledge. And like, it is a good,
Right.
like holistic, but it's an anaerobic thing. So if
Yes.
you, you can kind of gut through it, so to speak, if you don't have the aerobic base. But as much as it pains me to admit it, like the aerobic base, like that's your fundamental. And if you've got that
Yeah.
there, then not only can you survive doing the CPAT once, but then you can probably do it again in
Yeah.
5-10 minutes and not be white for the rest of the day.
Well, and that speaks to understanding the demands of the actual job, doesn't it? Right? Like, that is an important thing. Being able to put the gear on, carry the hose, go up the ladder one time. Yeah, that's part of it. But it's being able to do that over and over. It's going from being an ROTC cadet to being an operator in the field. And that battle could be 12 hours long. Right? Like you said, there's no like, hey, time out. I'm tired. I've done my 300-meter sprint already. Can you repeat that? And that's where I think you start to see, and we see in sport, you just don't get shot at the end of it, right? Like, you see, like, when it's
horses
the repeat
do, but
efforts,
that's a different story.
Yeah, exactly. It's the repeat efforts where you drop off, and that's where we start losing both our cognitive abilities, physical, fine motor skills, all the things that are really important in the execution, the things that we sort of think about as being the job. But those go away as the physical capacity starts to die off. As you quite rightly said, that aerobic base that allows you to recover and maintain your output is really, really critical and not necessarily understood as we translate into the outputs from these tests.
Exactly. And, with that, I mean, actually, to go to your comment, when we talk about like the military, you're talking about in certain situations, you could be obviously carrying encumbered with easily 100 pounds worth of gear for a number of hours on foot, and then it's drop the gear and get real kinetic real fast for a matter of minutes. And like, it's a matter of you have to have that gas still in the tank, because you still have to be able to move fast, and move under load and under fire and all of those other considerations. So, I like to think of it as, I believe the term that they use is sometimes like, it's just reserves. So essentially it's like, what's your functional reserve? So if you have you've got that military operator and they are a 600-pound deadlifter. Well, it turns out grabbing their 200-pound, well, maybe 300-pound, once you have all the equipment on their partner, and dragging them is, and I know my math is being very lazy, listeners at home, I'm sorry about this, but you're still talking about something that's like 50% of their maximal effort. And that's like, like in a gym, everything's set up perfectly. But I mean, I think any of us could walk up to 50% of our max on a deadlift and pick it up without a whole lot of warming up, without a whole lot of going. But if instead, their max deadlift is 300 pounds, and they again have that aforementioned partner, like, oh, dude, like moving that person is going to equal a maximal effort, and that's, we're not even getting into all of the other fatigue that's going into it. And so we're not trying to lose our minds with like, we need to, train 24/7. Instead, it's like, it really boils down to is we're doing some stuff that's building maximal capacity and then just building that general work base. And the nice thing is zone 2 is one of those things that, you and I can be rocking next to each other, at a decent clip, but we're building that work capacity. We're building that general aerobic battery, but, hopefully we're holding a conversation and actually enjoying life, not the straight up, like, we have to be going and, long distance runners hating our lives, pounding on joints that probably don't like that much impact in the first place, and going from there.
Well, I can tell you as a lifelong lifter and power based athlete, I recently started a running program with a long term. No, mentally, emotionally, no. And it is so hard. And wondering where this zone 2 actually is in running, because I actually can't go slow enough to be in my zone 2. So it is difficult when you think about, so things like rooking there and having other options available to build that base. But I'd love to see sort of where we go. So we understand now, okay, we've got to get this battery of the demands of the sport, of the activity.
Yeah. Employment.
How is that being translated into actionable insight and actions that the operator can then implement? Because again, like when we come up with the plan, okay, you go here and see the PT, you go here and see the strength coach, and then the data science people have got this, and we're going to test you on the force plates. We actually have things to go through and implement the plan based on the results. What are you seeing in terms of the support that these guys are receiving in that regard?
Okay, well, I guess let's get bleak. So where we're at, it's really cool, which is in the state of Kentucky. Every single police precinct outside of Lexington Metro Police, Louisville Metro Police, and Highway Patrol all do their cadet training out of what's known as the Department of Criminal Justice Training Center. So two things. One is you see a whole lot of cop cars passing through Richmond, which was a little off-putting when I first went there. Two, I told you I'm from St. Louis, and my wife and I met when we were doing our master's degree at St. Louis University, and I lived in the city. So I know what the sound of like small arms fire is at night. And so I was walking onto campus. I didn't realize there's a gun range on the other side of the road. So I just hear the telltale sign of like a lot of guns going off. I'm like head down, like meekly running into my office and like on the news, like, is there like a bank holdup or like a heist or something going on? And like one of my coworkers like, what? I'm like, gunshots. I'm like, oh, you mean like the shooting range they have on the south side of campus? I'm like, oh, thank you for telling me about this on the interview. So, it's, but, all of those guys come from every single county in Kentucky. And obviously there's something to be said about we will simply say the financial health of some of the smaller counties and then in turn smaller towns. So some of those cadets during training are getting paid at certain points because they're not getting their full wage because they're not on, the job. Mind you, this was knowledge in the 2010s. So hopefully the rates have gone up.
Yeah.
But some of them were making $4 an hour during training. So they get paid $8 an hour to be an actual officer in Eastern Kentucky because that's how small the budgets are.
Are you serious?
So I unfortunately am. And so and the staff there, the instructors, I cannot say enough good things about these folks that I've worked with. They're great. And they, all of them were, 20-year police officers, military, something along those lines. And this is kind of their retirement job. And now they're trying to kind of pass on the knowledge and try to build that. And at the same point, because they need more officers and, again, fiscal realities of Kentucky, they went from, I believe it was a 26-week, and then it was 24, and now they're down to, I believe it's 20 weeks of training. So they have to learn the law. They have to learn defensive tactics. They have to have, obviously, physical development. They have to learn, obviously, marksmanship. They have to learn driving tactics. Like, they have all of these things. And we're condensing this into a really short period of time. And everyone is doing their best. But, again, we can say what we will about the resource availability. So I think they do a really good job of curating to the biggest rocks that matter. So developing, hopefully, a good relationship with physical fitness, developing, their skills that they're going to need for the job. And unfortunately, due to, shall we simply say, logistical situations, they're a little handcuffed, sorry, bad puns, we're talking about cops, with some of the exercise selection for fear of injuring the cadets, because it's not like a high school coach where it's like, yeah, you'll have new high schoolers every year. Since it's like, we only have like this person that's in slotted for this job and they need to be here by this date because this cop is retiring or this cop is something else. And so it's a situation where they're not even able to do the exercise selection level of training that I'm sure you and I would prefer, and having that opportunity. So, with all of those constraints, I think they're doing a fine job. But unfortunately, once they get to their precinct, I think it's a matter of, okay, now you are a professional. And just like you and I as professionals, we still read to stay up to date and to make sure that we're developing our skills. We still, practice our craft in a variety of ways. And that's the thing. It's like you as a police officer, we're speaking more from that context. Like, hopefully you as a firefighter, you're not like starting fires and putting them out.
Right.
But if you're a police officer, like hopefully you are going to the gun range. Hopefully you are doing some type of combatives and you are doing something for your fitness, just like the firefighters are doing something for their fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Because the simple reality is, skill obviously is an incredibly important component, but the reality of, and this is a bit of a fallacy, but I do enjoy the fact that Ronnie Coleman was a police officer.
Yeah.
Because can you imagine that guy gets out of a police cruiser, and I don't care how drunk someone is, and you just look at it like, yeah, officer, I'm sorry, or you're just going to run. There is no like, I'm going to fight this guy like that.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can outrun him over 300. That's all I'm hoping.
Oh man. Because you're just gonna get arrested, tired. Like that's the only difference. But and I think when you think about the realities, and this is where we're getting into a bit of conjecture, but I think Dave Grossman does a good job with some of his writings in like On Combat, where it's the first thing you're disincentivizing the individual with is your own body. If they look at you and be like, oh, I don't know, and then you have your physical fitness and you have your ability to protect yourself with your own hands, and you have a litany of tools. And so you have a lot of opportunities, to de-escalate simply through, both how you carry yourself and
your physical
how
presence.
You talk.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I am definitely going full armchair quarterback here, but my goal is with these cadets we worked with is like, give them every single tool you can have.
Yeah.
Because, unfortunately, they might have to go to the firearm. But if the first thing they could do is just stand up and, kind of flex their traps, and the other person like, I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to fight this guy.
Yeah. And just like, how you look, there's something to be said of like, you do have those humans that, are those hippopotamuses that have got one hell of an aerobic battery. But, it's one of those things you can't really hide, your traps, your forearms, something like that. You can see people where it's like, that person has some physical fitness that I don't know. And we're speaking from very specific types of components. So again, if you're that officer, okay, not that we're training strictly for bodybuilding, but muscle mass is obviously going to be useful for a lot of physical tasks, because the having to move objects, including yourself, is going to be useful. Then having the aerobic battery to be able to do it, recover, and then do things again. We just watched the Olympics, and one of the coolest events in my mind, plus I need to do the research of like how they came up with the duathlon, like triathlon. Let's go ski or let's go swim and bike and run, and let's just see who's fastest. And like duathlon, let's go ski and shoot at shit and see who's the fastest. Like, and I apologize for swearing on your podcast. Who was like, this is like our javelin. Like this is our like sports specific task.
Yeah.
But you could see how they've got amazing aerobic batteries, and then they can obviously calm themselves down and be incredibly precise.
Right.
And they go right back into it. And you see that type of ability to, do things that are metabolically challenging, but still be accurate in things like you look at like NFL quarterbacks, you look at Major League Baseball pitchers, like they've got a better aerobic battery. They typically are going to do a better job of recovering between plays and still maintain their ability to see the field and proceed. And again, they have a rule set that is far more kinder, gentler.
That I think is where the growing recognition that things like injury risk, fatigue and then the actual demands of your job, like the accuracy. Because we think about in sport a lot, like the accuracy of that quarterback, the accuracy of the pitch. But as you're rightly saying, it's underpinned by these physical attributes, right? We have to be in a position in the important moments to execute as well as we did right at the beginning, maybe when it's less important. And for these guys, like you said, the consequences of not executing well become dire quite fast. And we go through the warm-up, you got your delineated periods of the game. Cop's going to drive around for 6 hours and then have to jump out of his car and get into a full sprint, a full Brazilian jiu-jitsu grapple, go through all of that, no warm-up, no stretch. And so I think that's where training for the specific requirements and training for the injury profiles of your profession in a strength and conditioning specific training manner, not just this general fitness. It's great, go and do some CrossFit, go to the gym. But that's where, that specific support is so important. How do we translate from demands to your weaknesses? Where are your areas you need to work on into a very specific, well-coached training program beyond the fit guy in the station? Oh, that guy's in great shape. Let's do his program. Right. So it's like, how do we get that support available to these guys who have such important jobs?
Fantastic question. And I would say, aside from trying to figure out what your own limiting factor is, I think we've got a lot of pieces to break down. One is the obvious point out of you don't get to go and do a 5-10 minute dynamic warm up and then get into a foot pursuit. It is a jump out and go, or jump out and, try to separate things or whatever the job requires. So part of it is when we're in the gym, obviously we spend our time warming up. We spend our time making sure that we mobilize, but we're trying to pick exercises, trying to, you can talk about like prehab type exercise. So concerns about obviously pulling a hamstring. So we want to make sure that those are naturally very long and very strong. We want to make sure that we are doing things we need to make sure the low back is being decompressed because of the vest that's being constantly pushing down on them, plus the duty belt as well on the hip. And what are we doing to make sure that we're doing exercise selection to diminish the negative effects of wearing the equipment for the job, but also, for lack of a better term, is making sure our tissues are of such high quality that we don't require extensive warm-ups. So, you've probably got, in listener at home, there's probably like one or two exercises that you feel comfortably you could go into a gym and do 80% of your max cold. And I know I'm speaking from a resistance training component, but then there's the other movements where it's like, oh no, I'm going empty bar 25s with 45s and like slowly stepping up, because now that's the pattern that can be due to previous injury, but it also can be due to your tissue qualities, length, and otherwise they're tight enough that it's one of those things of like, okay, so what are you doing with your training, your exercise selection, your programming to help enhance those tissues so you're not going to have to go through, again, that long warm up, because the goal is, because our cognitive capacity is very finite. We want all that cognitive bandwidth going towards problem solving in the moment, not like, ooh, these hamstrings are a little tight. Like, I don't want them to pop as a weasel. Like, oh, like my calf's feeling a little funky. And that's where it's called the job task analysis. You can look and see, and where it's obviously reported data of like, okay, here's how police officers often get injured. And you can look that up at kind of like nationwide research, and then certain, states and otherwise will publish a bit more information, kind of like the aforementioned component on injuries and firefighters. And so it's like, okay, if we know here's the ways they typically get injured, and there is the straight up like they got shot, like, well, I mean, aside from wearing a vest, like there's not much you can really do, but like, X amount of cops have pulled their hamstrings. Like, okay, which makes sense. Like, or plus, you're literally sitting on that hamstring and you're kind of laminating it. And are you working in a precinct that allows you to kind of get out of the vehicle every once in a while, kind of walk around, do just, a little bit of, I think it'd be interesting if you're driving down the street and you see a police officer doing like, tin soldiers walking down or, just doing some hamstring mobility, work. Like, you and I'd be like, yeah, hell yeah, officer over there is ready to go. But everyone else be like, what is going on? But therein lies back to your question, which is like, okay, that's on the whole, like, what can we have in our program and how can we program things? Because now, okay, your fatigue from insert that session is going to increase your injury risk for the next time you happen to be going. So that means if I'm working with a police officer, just a purely hypothetical, different places, there's so many different ways to split that up, but we're going to assume that they're on 12-hour shifts and they effectively are going like 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, and then weekends. It's still a crap ton of hours, but bills don't pay themselves. We'll leave it alone. I wouldn't hammer them with like a real hard workout that involves hamstrings until I'd say as soon as you're off shift on what would be Friday, you have the next 2 days off. That's when we're going to smoke your hamstrings. So you've got 48 hours to recover before you're back on. And then that Tuesday before you have Wednesday off, this would be something where we would do less volume, but we would give you at least some of the stimulus that's going to help there. And within that, let's be pragmatic, never dogmatic. So if that officer finds that like, hey, all RDLs do is hurt my low back, but good mornings feel okay. All right. Or all glute ham raises do is make me feel like I'm going to shear my hamstrings off the bone, but I can do a lying leg curl and we can use a pad to kind of put them a little bit more in end range and get just a little bit more, of a stretch in the bottom to just, again, help with that tissue quality and length, then that's fine. And I think an unfortunate issue that we often have of people that go meathead and try and be sports performance is we always think of the bodybuilding style of training like, well, if I'm not sore, I didn't do anything.
Yes.
And it's total volume. So if you can get in 3 training sets but have no soreness, so that Tuesday into your next shift on Thursday, and then you go in Friday and you go smash yourself with 8, 9 training sets, so you definitely do have some soreness, but you've got the 48 hours for that to slowly resolve. And then you go from there, and then so now we're laying around the complexity. There's nothing wrong with maintenance programming. At a certain point, you're probably strong enough to do the job. Like, don't get me wrong. If you're a 300-pound plus bench presser, I think you're probably strong enough to like pick up most human beings that somehow put you on your back and like throw them somewhere. But to go from 300, 400 pounds is probably not going to help you as much as it would to maybe help pull 3 minutes off your 1.5 mile time, to go and pull 20 seconds off your 300 meter. So it's kind of like a sigmoidal graph. So at a certain point, you're so weak. Like if you can't bench press an empty bar, like I don't want to get punched in the face ever again in my life. But if I had to get punched in the face by somebody, I want the guy that can barely bench 45, not the dude that can bench 450, because that is a hell of a lot more force there. But once you get on that top part of the graph, like going into those numbers, it's like, it's cool. But where are you in the middle of that graph? Where is it like, if I can make just a little bit of progress, I'm going to get a huge return on my investment and be able to do better. And it might end up being like, hey, it's actually my overhead strength that sucks. Like my joke with my athletes is, bench press is cool, but by the time you can use it, I've already put you on your back. But I'm terrified of the guy that can just do this with me arbitrarily. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I can still knee him somewhere, but they're still like, oh no, I am now off ground and I'm at the mercy of how this gentleman chooses to, or lady chooses to return me to the ground. But again, the goal
and can you do a pull-up? Right? Can you row? Can you pull? Like, because you're going to have to climb over some stuff at some point, right? So I think all of these things are really important. And then on the other side of that, you jump over the fence. At some point, you've got to land, right? So now, do you have the leg strength? Because that's what happens with NBA players. Nobody gets hurt jumping in the air. You get hurt when you land, right? So do you have the strength throughout your kinetic chain to not tear your ACL? Right? That's going to come down to your hip, your hamstring, your quad. Can you use your muscles as shock absorbers and not your joints? Right? These are all going to be such important things for you to be able to do. Because we talk, as you went through, what are the measurements? We measure push-ups, we measure bench press. Do we measure leg strength? Right? Because that how fast you can run, how fast your legs recover. Can you run upstairs? Can you climb over things and land without getting injured? It's going to be hugely important that your legs are very strong. So I think these are really important.
Okay, now let's work. I love how we're just going further into Pandora's box here, which is, and this is where, we think about any skill. You go from that unconscious, incompetence to conscious incompetence. Like, I didn't know I sucked at this, to like, now I know I suck at this. And then I'm conscious competent. So like, I'm good, but I have to focus on it. And the goal is for the basic movement skills is we want to go to unconscious competence. And so let's go back to the jujitsu. I told you about it's one of those things that like I do the math in my head, but I never want to do it, which is we have some really good instructors, and a number of them are like, black belts in jujitsu and multiple other types of fighting arts. And it's one of those things that like, if I try to grapple with them, I know I'm not good at it, and how easily they're going to be able to put me on my posterior, lock me up, probably while they're holding a conversation with someone else. So, and I think there's like another gem to mine there, which is let's be so good at our landing, technique that we don't have to go, like make sure land, toe, heel, stick the butt back, absorb through all the joints. But it says like, no, they just intuitively can do those things. And I'm not saying every cop needs to be doing parkour on top of jujitsu, on top of, barbell lifting, on top of all these components. But there's something to be said about doing some plyometrics, because the gym in workout clothes, this is the easiest time for me to practice technique. The second I've got to throw on my vest, my duty belt, or depending on whatever configuration you happen to have there, now I've got this external load, which is only making everything harder about movement. And, your comment on the whole being able to do a pull-up, grappling is a lot of your ability to hold something in.
Yes.
And so that's why you can see how like, hey, get to where you're good at pull-up, and then somebody like, well, that's not the same hand position as a pull-up. Like, that's true. You should be doing some probably form of grip work. And you can do towel pull-ups and other things like that. So you can be a little bit more, kind of bang for your buck on both. But I don't think there's anything wrong with doing your back training is your back training, strap in, and your grip training is your grip training. Plus, if you're doing jujitsu, you're probably getting a lot of grip work while you're doing that. And then in turn, it's not the same as you going in there and doing, 3 sets of 10 on heavy dumbbell rows, on pull downs. And I think another gem as well to mine, which is, where is there overlap? So if you're doing jujitsu and you're going live and you're going hard, you are definitely checking the zone 4, zone 5 box. Your cardio is now your basic like fitness stuff, your zone 2, throw your vest on or whatever, a weighted ruck, which is about the simulated amount of weight you're going to be wearing in your equipment in the field, and just go for a hike, and just go for, walk a dog or something else that works for you. And you can see how you have those two built in. So it's one of those situations where I think often people like, you need to do all of this, you have to do all that, you have to do all that, all that. There's overlap in those Venn diagrams. So, and same thing. If we're talking about your takeoff and your landing kinetics, if you're somebody who actually genuinely plays a lot of basketball, is doing a lot of, or heck, you like to do parkour on the weekends, like, you're probably okay. But if you're someone that's never played a sport where you've had to do a lot of change of direction work, you've had to do, literal like takeoff and landing in not great positions, then you can see how just adding that as something you just superset in between your sets of squats, lateral box jumps, things along the lines of getting yourself used to not just straight up to the box and straight back down, but instead of like, okay, I'm just working on kind of a depth jump like a stick. I just want to work on making sure that I can hit and have that so built in that I don't even have to really worry about where I'm at in space.
Yeah. And that's how we used to think about it with sport. When you play in 82 games, whether it's NHL or NBA, we'd often lift after games. On the road, at home, doesn't matter. We'd get the guys in, we'd do a lift. And you had mentioned the maintenance lift before. By the time we're at game 60, the hay is in the barn. If we're not strong at that point, we're not getting strong. So it's about maintaining once we're in the season. And so it would be quite small percentages of 1RM, but consistent, right? We throughout the season, very regularly, every practice day, every game day, doing something, right? So we would get touch points most days. But to your point, we had just done the most explosive stuff that we would ever be able to do, right? I can't train a guy as explosively as he's back checking in hockey, or if he's going up to block a shot. We got our jumps in. So we would focus on strength and stability after the game. And that's where we saw injury prevention, really be effective, is in, as I said, consistency, but then also in not being redundant, not trying to do more of this stuff because we got to check a box as a strength coach. It was really about seeing what was the athlete missing, what wasn't in the program. Something I want to go back to that you'd mentioned was tissue quality.
Mm-hmm.
It's another part that we have in sport is we got the athletic trainer, we got the physical therapist, we got the massage therapist, we got an osteopath, we got an acupuncturist, you name it. There was a culture in hockey when I got there where the guys weren't allowed even in the training room unless they were already hurt and rehabbing. So we had to really work with our GM and our head coach to change that. And we actually made mandatory preventative sessions where we would monitor for tissue quality, right? If a guy's training load was really high, we would mandate they were on the table the next day just to work on the tissue quality and make sure that tissue could accept that extra load without breaking down, without fatigue really going into that weak spot and causing the injury. When you talk about this, give us something concrete that people can do about tissue quality, because it's sort of an abstract concept.
Yeah.
What are you referring to there? And how can the operator who doesn't have access to all of these medical staff and modalities, how can they go about this?
We can think about, as bad as this sounds, like quality of meat. When we think about, that tissue quality, a lot of us are a lot more gristle because of the amount of scar tissue and otherwise in those areas. And because of that, your body will do certain things, like it will cause a little bit of hypertonicity. So, AKA, you talk about knots where your muscles can be tight because it's trying to protect you. It doesn't want those, joints to go into those ranges of motion for one reason or another. And so part of it is trying to work on that tissue, and it's often through things like self-myofascial release, aka you talk about foam rolling, you can talk about massage guns, massage sticks, things to go and apply a compressive force. And even you want to get real gnarly, you can go try needling. It's best to think of it as along the lines of your natural flexibility / mobility you have in those tissues, and then of course how well they function to everything else. Your body compensates because something is missing there. So now it has to compensate by doing other things. And so, for example, that's the thing with a lot of people, which is if you've got tight hips, tight hamstrings, congratulations, you compensate through your low back. And that thing is it can absorb some shock. It can do some flexion under load, but it's not a good long-term strategy. So we want to make sure that we keep those hamstrings nice and long and loose. And that way, when you've got to sprint, you've got to jump, you've got to get bent over, it's flexion at the hip, not the spine. So that way you can be not just athletic in the moment, but you can lower your injury risk. Now, it's never going to go to zero. And the other thing that I want to make sure that I put this out there, I should have started this as a preface, is this is why sleep and nutrition are like so much more powerful than the best masseuse on the planet, unless they can massage you so well and put you to sleep and you get the aforementioned sleep in the first place. So, but that's the thing, is like when you're talking about your context of these professional athletes, we know that they're eating because the food's provided. We know that, well, we hope they're sleeping. That's probably a component that is still a bit of a challenge. I can do massage. I can do ultrasound. I can do cupping. I can do any of those modalities. And don't get me wrong, the placebo effect is a real thing, and a number of recovery modalities don't have a lot of convincing evidence that they're super effective. But if it works and it's only because of the placebo effect and it's not something that's going to cause me to go bankrupt and or it's doing more damage to me than it's helping, then you know what? By all means, keep doing insert whatever modality.
Well, we would tier our recovery modalities. There's the ones that there is really good evidence for, right? That we know, like sleep and nutrition. We have to get those right. there are some that legitimately have a really good impact. Everything else, what we found, and what the research has shown us over and over, if you think it's helping you, it's helping you. That was the research. If you didn't believe in it, it didn't cause recovery. If you did, it worked. And so that was our approach exactly. We would actually give them points, right? You have to come in and get 20 points today on the recovery day. These are worth 10 points, and these are worth 1 point each. Do whatever you want. Get it however you want. But I would suggest you do a couple of the 10-point ones and get out of here. I think we, in sport, certainly a lot of young practitioners, they have this sort of fallacy of control. Like, if I can see you and I'm doing something to you, you're recovering, when actually recovery is pretty passive. If we have you eat, stay at home and sleep and spend some time laughing with your family, you recovered. But instead, I'm going to get you up at 8 a.m. I'm going to have you drive to the practice facility. You're going to see the head coach where your cortisol is going to go through the roof because you had a shitty game yesterday. You're going to sit here in the cold tub that you hate, which is going to cause you even more stress. But I can see you. I'm the young sports scientist and I read a paper, damn it. Like,
you're speaking my language. I was visiting I will not say the name of the program, but it was a big time D1 program, and they had their soccer girls in on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And it's like 7 a.m. and they're doing a recovery session of rolling out on foam rollers, and then they're going to make them do some active recovery on Kaiser bikes, which don't be long. I love Kaiser bikes. But it's like, yeah, what would have been better for those gals to let them stay in their freaking beds and not get up for this and do this at noon. Like, who cares? Like, come in later. But and I think too many people, they step over the $100 bill to, jump in front of the street for a penny. And it's like, bro, at the end of the day, recovery modalities, and I think, and that's, again, we're pragmatic, not dogmatic. Like, hey, are we getting enough sleep? Are we getting in enough nutrition? And we're not trying to be like, oh, dude, if you're not doing broccoli, rice, and chicken, you failed. Like, dude, at a certain point, a gas station burrito is better than starvation. I'm willing
100%.
to, like, that's a hill that I'll kill on because I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
Not on that, but I will make someone go with. And with the recovery, I think another thing to be mindful of is sometimes it's addition through subtraction. Because if if I'm working with an athlete, like, hey, I want you to go and do 10 minutes of breath work, maybe a little journaling before you go to bed. It's like, well, by doing that, in reality, like, maybe that's not the thing that really helped. What helped is they got off their damn phone and weren't on Instagram and go and doom scroll for the next hour through the random number generator there. So, with your modalities, if they're coming to you, and Lord knows you probably had those gems where they did, that's when you found out that, hey, I've got a whole other bunch of lifestyle stress outside of this going on. And then you're like, okay, we're going to take a little easier in the weight room because, you're going through some family health issues, you're going through this, that, and the other. And we understand that all the stress is cumulative. And, when you're young, you sometimes think you can take on everything, and you don't realize the whole straw on the camel's back analogy applies to you. So.
Right. But, this is an important point, I think, especially for this kind of the person that's drawn to being a first responder, fire, police, military, EMTs, the stress level of that job, right? We can't keep adding. I just love that you've raised this because it's so important that we don't have to go through a highly traumatic, highly stressful shift and add on a 2-hour CrossFit workout of the day. That's not going to be helpful, right? There is a place for our journaling and our breath work, right? Part of that, we talked about biathlon. Part of being able to have massive physical exertion followed by a very accurate execution of a skill is your ability to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic. Our ability to recover from day to day from a traumatic shift is going to be down to how we process that and reduce that sympathetic drive as we deal with it. So our ability to embrace breath work and know that is the way to bring the body back into line. I think those are really important factors to add into that mix, particularly for these highly, highly stressful roles that people have, where they're processing trauma that we can't imagine day to day, right? Like I am never going to see that, right? And God bless anyone who is drawn to serve in those positions, because it is thankless, right? So I think there's a couple of things on mindset there around your recovery, physically and mentally, that are interconnected. But also, as I said, we changed that mindset in hockey around seeking help and treatment and training and expertise outside, that I think probably there's an element of that still in the culture of these environments. And I'm really interested in what you've seen just in how people express their ability to go out and seek help for stuff like this.
And this is obviously a challenging point of the conversation. And first, I would like to say thank you for correcting me. It's the biathlon, not the duathlon. So I appreciate that. And it's twofold. One, which is understanding that you do need to resolve the stress response. Like, it is a dump of epinephrine. And whereas I do like your idea of let's not add stress response on a stress response, instead let's work on trying to get this to come to a conclusion. And this is where something like zone 2 cardio, a lower intensity session, something that still gives us, because we got that increased cardiac output, our blood pressure's up, let's get to essentially our body kind of resolve part of it physically, but then we're also doing the down regulation aspect on the breathing side. And the mental side of the trauma, and this is not me trying to speak out of sorts, but it is unfortunately a known aspect of that. Some of these professionals take their work home with them, and it's not in a great way for their family relationships. And so, and it's a known factor. Obviously, before it was something that was probably a little bit more not talked about, so to speak, or at least tried to hide. Whereas I've had conversations with these instructors where it's like, hey, like, you did the right thing, and this is speaking of, like, they obviously got into some type of physical altercation, and you could see how any of us, when you go hardcore into that sympathetic overdrive, you go into hardcore fight situation of you wanted to do more than perhaps apprehend the individual. And, and that's the thing is we hold them to that standard for reasons. And we are not here to have those conversations, but it's an important aspect. But then you could see how it's like, I, as a person who's very upset at what this person did to maybe another human being or something else, but I need to be a law enforcement officer, so I do need to not go beyond what is my job description of what is an appropriate way to apprehend an individual, but I still have that animosity. I still have that frustration with it. So what is a better outlet for that energy? Because it's still, for lack of a better term there, and we still need to resolve it, because it's unfair to you and to your loved ones for you to go home with that type of thing. And so now, of course, that's one of those things that we don't have the perfect answer to it, other than we can develop these skills like the breath work, like the things to help bring ourselves down. Because I'm sure every single one of us has had not that same level of thing, but you're like, I wish I would have been a bad human being to that other person, because it would have felt really good in the moment. But it's like, and that's why I would go to adult timeout. And whereas it's like, that's why I like to work out, because it does give me a physical way to sometimes resolve things, as well as still being an adult, processing my emotions in a healthy way, and having ways to bring myself down when I find myself into that level of sympathetic arousal in a way that's, it's not useful as a member of a society.
Yeah. And I think I'd love to emphasize your point there on the stress response that any human is going to get. There's no judgment, or, this is a normal human affect that everyone is going to experience. The response to that, I think, is the key. And we've all walked in to the house. We've carried that stress from outside into the house, and we've all, yelled at the dog, snapped at your wife, husband. We've all regretted doing that. We did a great conversation on cognitive performance recently with Noah Rowland, and we were talking about things like meditation and breath work as practice, right? Being in the situation, that's in the game. That's game day. You don't get better during the game. You're just executing at that point. So practice is going away and doing your mindfulness, your breath work practice. And for me, even if you sit in the car and you just take 5 slow breaths and you correct your posture, you sit up, you take breaths before you get out the car to walk into the house, even that amount of sympathetic down regulation, bringing yourself a little bit more parasympathetic. And we're just trying to get you to create a bit of space between stimulus and response. Just your ability to not react impulsively, but to pause and give the appropriate level of response. I think that's where this can stop that spiral out of control when you've had a really tough week. And look, these guys are going to have really tough weeks. So I think that this is maybe a cultural thing where we're seeing more conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming more acceptable to talk about breath work and meditation and things like that within these cultures.
Yeah, and that's where it's adjacent to it. And again, I'm really lucky that we've had these opportunities to build these relationships and work with these professionals. And I will always remember in that me and a fellow faculty member got to watch simulated pullovers, and they were running a number of scenarios. And one of those scenarios, the individual comes out of the vehicle with a weapon and just opens fire on the police officer, and they have to show that they can move to the correct positioning, like literally using the engine block and like the uprights of the car as its own barrier. And these are on simunition, so it's a normal firearm, but it's firing essentially paintballs. And me and my fellow coworker were wearing like helmets, and like that's it. So like it's going to hurt if we get hit by any of these things. And it was fascinating because we got to see a number of police officer or cadets go through this tireless training. And this is where there's something you said about that stress inoculation side of things, which is I will always remember one of those officers literally leaning behind the car, doing this stuff with a gun, yelling, "I'll effing kill you," over and over again. And like I'm standing sideways, like trying to have like the smallest target I can be to not get winged by this guy who's just spray and pray. And, after they go through the scenario, the instructor is debriefing the cadet like, hey, it's okay. It's very stressful. You can't yell, "I'll effing kill you" as an officer. Like, that's really a faux pas. Like, we don't do that, blah, blah, blah. And the guy, straight up to the instructor goes, "I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all." And when you go that far into that sympathetic, like hardcore, seeing red, fight or flight, no professional athlete is thinking like, I should stomp on this person on the ground in front of millions of viewers right now because I'll get away with it and no one's going to notice me, do anything beyond the flag.
That'll be
like,
fine.
Exactly. So, that's where it's easy for us, because we're not in that level of arousal to make character judgments about these people that are literally, they're in the equivalent of like shitting their pants level of fear.
Yeah.
And so it's an important component that, and now it comes back to the conversational fitness. The better physical fitness I have, the better training I have when that's not simunition anymore, I now have a much better chance of navigating that stimulus well, surviving it. And then, of course, like you said, afterwards, being able to bring myself down from it in a much more healthy, sustainable way. Because the simple reality is, if once you get that heart rate up high enough, it's really hard to focus on many other things than just what's the clear and present. And you can think about tunnel vision, you can think about auditory exclusion. There's a lot of weird things that happen whenever people go that hard into sympathetic overdrive, or sympathetic drive in general, I guess would be the better way to describe it. But with that individual of like, okay, how can we in training teach how to come up and come back down, come up and come back down? So, and that's where you see certain people in, different contexts, doing, X amount of burpees and then practicing, shooting at a range that allows that. So it's like I got my heart rate up and now I can still have fine-tuned motor skills. What can I do? And that's where you see different sports will do things like free throws in basketball, like let's go run, aggressive conditioning and then try to shoot a free throw, which I'm
Right.
not trying to say those are the two same
Well,
arenas, but in the
but
idea
similar,
of,
right? Like in principle.
yes,
And
of
I think
stress.
that's where like we can see a really, actually I've used this before, like with the basketball free throw. I've never seen a basketball player walk up to take a free throw and not taken some deep, slow breaths, right? Bounce the ball, right? Every time. Whenever you see an NBA guy walk up to take the shots, and it's taking that breath to bring the heart rate down, right? To bring yourself into a parasympathetic state so that you can execute your skill. And so the principle is the same, whatever the projectile is.
Where the projectile is. Fascinating way to phrase that.
Or
Not
how it's
wrong. I
being
mean,
delivered, right?
yeah, it's a projectile. That ain't wrong.
Yeah, right. So we're right at the hour. I want to give people who may not have access to you or I, who are in these highly physically demanding roles. Let's give them some real usable stuff for their physical preparation. How do I better prepare myself for my role so that I have my health, my longevity, and I have my good relationships throughout that career journey?
So, a couple different pieces. One is this is where, have that moment of mindfulness as to, okay, what is my physical preparation like? So if you're
Mhm.
somebody that comes like we do from a barbell sports or, strength power sports, it's safe
Yeah.
to say you probably have the basics of understanding the power and strength side of the continuum. But maybe, the most aerobic thing you ever did was, walk up to the barbell.
Right.
So in that case, it's like, okay, what can be some type of aerobic style training that I'm going to tolerate and maybe find some joy in? So this is where I should go be a shill for Peloton and tell people to go get
Hmm.
one of those bikes. And but the idea with cardio is you just have to do something that's going to get your heart rate up and keep it within that range for an appropriate amount of time. So, when in
Which
doubt,
is how long? What's an appropriate amount of
exactly.
time?
So we're really talking about just going about 20 minutes, and this is be the point at which you can hold a conversation, but you don't want to you don't want to just hang out here all day. And then of course doing that maybe 2 times a week, and then once a week, definitely the zone 5 stuff. Easy way to start off is just 3-minute rounds, 3 rounds of it, take a minute between each, and then you go max. One thing that I've done recently, sounds a little ridiculous, but I like doing mine on Airdynes. So like the assault bike, you push and pull and hate life.
And when
And
you
I
said
will,
you like doing those,
oh, hate it, hate it. But
weird way to phrase it, but okay.
because I'm a child, I will play the Superman theme and
Nice.
try to crank it for all 3 minutes of that, and then
Nice.
pause. Then I will listen to Superman by Goldfinger, which is all about being old and not dealing with it, which is really
Right.
fitting because I really feel it on the second round. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things you can go about it that way. Other folks will like to do cycling. You can go running, and that's the thing. You can go out. Most people that are not really good aerobic athletes, if you go out and run, essentially a max effort 600 to 800 meters, that's going to take you, about that 3 minutes, walk the next, straight away, maybe 200,
Yeah.
and then do that again. And you'll have to do that like once a week. And the
Yeah.
resistance training for those of you guys that come from aerobic sports, you play a lot of soccer, played a lot of basketball, but you had an allergy to the barbell. You just got to go to the gym and just do something that's really heavy, push something away, pull something away, straighten your legs underneath something heavy,
Right.
and then do a little bit of core, and then maybe some lunges and maybe some carries because they're cool. But if you
Hmm.
do those things, you're kind of, and you only have to do that twice a week, hit everything in there at least once, and only need to do probably like 2, maybe 3 hard work sets to start off with. Meaning,
Yeah.
I could have maybe done 3 or 4 more good reps,
Yeah.
and you're golden. And in your area, look for what's known as the TSAC. It's the Tactical Strength and Conditioning Facilitator, or START-F.
Hmm.
Like if you can find providers that can maybe give you a basic program, feel free to shoot me an email, and I can maybe try
Yeah.
to give you some directions there. The National Strength and Conditioning Association has their wonderful website. You can just Google on there to try to find somebody that's going to be local to you. And, success leaves clues. So when in doubt, some of the people that you work with are jacked because they have better parents than you when it came to genetics on that. but some of them are more jacked than you simply because of, they've been doing it for a while. So they've probably figured out how to make it sustainable in your
Yeah.
specific work climate. So at least like, how do you structure your training? How's things set up? And, making things go from there.
I think that last point on talking to people who have found a way to make it sustainable, because the thing is like finding those 2 times a week or once a week or however many times a week to hit each of those items, but doing that every week, right? I would rather you do less frequently than try and get in shape in one workout, right? Don't try and do everything at once. Don't try and have one week that's absolutely perfect. If you can only show up, if you only have the energy to show up and do half of that, do it. Show up and just do a little bit, but do it every day. And finding the people in your environment with your same schedule, because it'd be easy to come to me and say, oh yeah, how do I do this? And I would have some very strong opinions on it, having never done it, right? Mm-hmm. But finding people who have found a way to make it work in your circumstance, such a valuable point there, Mike. Mm-hmm. What would be your top 3 if there were 3 things for people to focus on from today's episode? What would you start with?
At the end of the day, it's being pragmatic, not dogmatic. So the goal is you just need to find a consistent model, training, split, anything along those lines is sustainable. And then you've got some form of progression. Mm-hmm. And, undoubtedly in a lot of those first responders, depending on, what you do for that profession, you should have a working idea of what your strength and your weakness is. And then from there, it's typically our weaknesses in those areas that are going to be the bigger issue. So making sure that you're addressing those. And then the other thing of kind of is always think of if there's an order of importance. So don't get me wrong. You and I both have we both know there's no such thing as a perfect program, but we've got a pretty damn good idea of something that's in striking distance.
Right.
But if the only thing you can do is you can do push-ups at home, you can do pull-ups at home, and you can do a bunch of like bodyweight squats and lunges, you're still light year ahead of the person that doesn't train at all.
Yeah.
And so if gym access can be a challenge, the realities of your life and everything else, if all you can do every single day is do one max set of push-ups, one max set of pull-ups, and, a bunch of, squats, you still did something. And there's nothing wrong with just doing the bare minimum when you don't have the bandwidth. And then the goal is to try and progress those things. And, and that's where like, hey, if the option A is workout or sleep, and I'm already looking at 4 or less hours of sleep, you should probably just go to sleep.
Yeah.
If the option is gas station burrito or starvation, well, just make sure that you microwave it the appropriate amount of time to kill anything that might be on there, and give it some go. Because I mean, too many people are going to tell you like, if your water needs celery juice because it has to be alkaline, I'm like, tell you what, if you're dying of thirst in the desert, I will take hose water. Like, let's go.
Exactly right. Yeah, if we get to the point where the alkalinity of the water is our limiting factor, we've probably done a pretty good job. We're probably on top of our stuff.
Oh, absolutely. We were talking about like, well, I don't know if I like the farm that grass-fed cow came from. Like, hell yeah, brother.
A pretty good life.
Your diamond shoes are too tight. Your gold wallet can't fit any more $100 bills.
Exactly.
You're living it, man.
Exactly. You're all good. You're all good. And Mike, where can people find you, follow along with your work, and generally, learn more about what it is that you do?
Yeah. So you can look me up through Eastern Kentucky University, where I work as a professor. Follow me on Instagram, and I am very bad at putting content out there, but that's Mike Lane PhD, and you can always just shoot me a message there as well if you have questions. And I try to reply to folks, but I will be lying to you if I said that I do a good job of doing it rapidly.
That's fantastic. Well, we'll link all of this in the show notes, and we'll help people find you along the way. But thank you so much for your time today and for your work in this area, because this is an underserved population who are doing critical work. We're very grateful to our first responders and our military and, police personnel. And so it's great that we got people like you having their backs and helping them prepare for their jobs.
Oh, I appreciate you, and obviously what all those people really do for a living, because it's easy to be the coach and like, all right, you guys have fun on the field, because that is a very different consideration.
What a great conversation with Dr. Mike Lane. Here are the 3 key things that you can take away from today's episode. Number 1, be pragmatic, not dogmatic. Find a sustainable training structure that you can actually stick to, then build from there. The best program is the one you'll keep doing. Start with what fits your schedule and your life, and then add complexity as consistency takes hold. Number 2, know your weak points and address them. Most first responders come from strength or power backgrounds and are underserving their aerobic capacity. That gap is often the one that costs them. A strong aerobic base helps you recover faster between efforts, stay sharper under stress, and protect your long-term health well past retirement. Number 3, let perfect be the enemy of done. If all you can manage is a max set of push-ups, a max set of pull-ups, and some bodyweight squats, you'll still beat the alternative. Showing up with whatever you have that day is always worth more than waiting for the perfect conditions. Progress compounds even in small doses. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave a rating or a review. It makes a real difference in helping us reach more people who could benefit from these conversations. You can stay connected with us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Vitality Collective Performance, where we share additional insights, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. The information shared in this episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your training, recovery, or health practices. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.